You had a long drive, I heard.
Long drive?
Yeah. Yeah.
What happened yesterday to lack of mentioning any of the Eastern nations?
Say that again?
None of the Eastern nations are mentioned in what's going on. You got 2 billion.
None of the
China,
Eastern nations.
You got 1 million people in India.
Oh, you mean those guys?
Those guys, and all the talk that we did yesterday, I should mention in recognition. There's nobody.
No. Well, ask yourself this. There's 7 billion people on the planet. No mention is made of most of them.
What?
Most of them are not mentioned, right? So what's the difference if it's China, Japan, or India? They're not included.
What happened to them?
They're goyim. I mean, the real question is what happens to goyim? That's the real question. Certain goyim are selected to be persecutory agents. Esav is the chief among them. Most of the goyim are just goyim that the Moshe wants to give them a chance in some manner to help Klal Yisrael. That's really what it is, you know. That's their whole source. Well, first of all, a goy that's Shomer Noach, he gets Olam Haba. So anyway, they have their own Olam Haba, whether they help Jews or not, as long as they're righteous. So that's all it is. It's just, you know, there's a tremendous difference between their Olam Haba and the Jews' Olam Haba, you know, because they get it through the Jew, but they have a chance to earn Olam Haba, or they have a chance to become Jewish. Many of the nations of the world, you know, Gerim and so on. So that's basically what it is. What the Bershom did, he didn't want to abandon them. Because after the Matan Torah, they were gone. There was no point in them. So he didn't want to abandon them because of tremendous Rahmanis. Because fourth, he created them, you know. So he said, okay, I'll give you guys your own tafkid. And you get Olam Haba. You can either become Jewish or remain Goy, but you need to be decent, upstanding, righteous Gentiles. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen that way. Most of them will be gone because they're Rishonim, each in their own way. But you know, the Bershom is a great judge, so in that sense, they're just their own tafkid. They're not related to Klal Yisrael directly. Could be indirectly, you know.
You would say that Esav are related to Klal Yisrael.
Yeah. They are the main. Esav and Yishmael are the major persecutory agents. In fact, the Satan is divided into those 2 areas. There's Esav and there's Yishmael. You'll notice that there are 35 Shiurim and 35 Purim, not Purim, cows. 35 belong to Esav, and the other 35 is Yishmael. You know. Oh, those are the Purim, yeah, like that, yeah. So those are the major nations that will subjugate the Jews. But the rest have no shaykhs directly, indirectly, but they can earn their own Olam Haba. It's really Rahmanis, that's what it is. You know, Russians didn't want to do away with them.
Let's keep the coffee out of the movie screen.
What's this? Oh, thank you. Wow, this is Mamish. Oh, David, you're an angel.
You want to wake up for this?
Is there sugar in here?
No.
I need 2 sweetened loaves. Does he have?
Let's go to work. All right, ready? Let's do it. Time is Torah. Are you in a particular parak today that we can follow, or?
You know, I'm the guy. Wherever you land me, I can talk. You ever notice this kind of guys, and you just put them down, and that's it. They begin.
This is the original curiosity. You know what curiosity is, right?
No.
It's a ship that just landed on Mars, walking around the planet, things out.
Oh, but it's real sugar. You don't have any sweet and low or artificial sugar?
They didn't have any.
No, they have. It's brown sugar, the least of the evils.
How's the air conditioner? Is it okay?
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
The grandfather is supposed to be here.
Oh, mine.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Thank God. It's the word.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. That's you guys. You want to get a
Okay, time.
Time.
Darech Hashem.
I think I had gone through in the winter. Ramchal's first parak is all about who is God, and I had gone through some of the ideas in the winter, but I don't know who was here in the winter that heard it. You were here, but that doesn't mean you're. What? You were here? Even mentally.
You remember?
You were here too. Yeah. So it's worthwhile, very important, to go over some of the ideas. They're very profound and they're critical to know. The real question, of course, is who is God? As we will see, wow. What is that? Hair dryer?
He's a professional guy for movies. He knows how to really take sound.
Rabbi, you're a professional teacher.
We're not messing around anymore.
Yeah,
It's the real deal.
Wow.
Very accommodating.
It's okay. I thought it was a shaper or something like that.
You don't get tasted during Shiur.
That's been recorded properly now.
Exactly.
Anyway, so let me summarize some very important ideas about who is God. I had mentioned that it's a mitzvah to know who God is. This is not a luxury, it's a mitzvah. How do we know that? Because at first of all, the Rambam counts it as a mitzvah say, a positive commandment. That Lodas is Hashem Lokecha, to know God. It's a mitzvah to know who God is. That's the first thing. We're not dealing here with options. God wants you to understand who He is to the extent that you can understand, obviously. That's the first idea. Second idea, where do we know this from? Because there's a pasuk in the Torah that says, Yodata Hayoim, and you will know this day, and you will turn it to your heart, which means that you're going to really inquire and think and investigate who God is, the nature of God.
Know this day and
Yodata Hayoim, and you will know this day. That means God wants you to know this day. And you will satisfy your heart, which means you'll make it tranquil, which means that you will really investigate, so you'll be satisfied with what your conclusions are. Okay? That was a very important idea. That what? Hashem hu Elokim, that God is the master. B'shamayim mimal, in the heavens above, and in the earth below, Einoid is nothing else. Or you can translate Einoid, there is no other God, but it doesn't say Einoid Elokim. It says Einoid, you know. So therefore God clearly says Yodat Hayoim, and you will know this day. So there's a mitzvah say to know that there is God, but also to inquire, to investigate who He is, what His nature is, to the extent, of course, that we can do it. Very important idea. So it's not an option. Third idea is that it's incredible when you ask people who God is. Of course, they all guess, but almost nobody, not almost, it's like nobody gives an answer to that. Each person perceives God in his way that he grew up with, you know. Most people envision God as a supreme being with supreme intelligence, right? But he's a big person. He's an invisible giant. Because he's obviously very powerful. He's obviously smart, right? He put the world together. Obviously he's a very unusual being. But when you think about it, most people, their understanding of God is not who he is, but what he does. Some people say that he's a king, but a king is a function. It's a position, right? It's not a person. It doesn't tell me who the person is. It just tells me that he is a king, means his position is a king, right? That's some people say he's a judge. Well, again, a judge is a job, not a person. Anybody can be a judge, you know. Most people do that, or they describe him that he's compassionate, he's also merciful, or long-suffering, and so on. But these are attributes, you know. But it doesn't tell me who he is really. When you think about it, the beginning of understanding who God is, you need to look in the Torah, where the Torah talks about something about who he is as opposed to what he does or how he acts. You can't identify somebody by his acts or his attributes. You could just say he possesses certain characteristics, you know, but it doesn't tell you who it is. So if you think about it, where in the Torah does it say who he is? You know, a really expression or statement about who is God himself. And what would the answer be? Who? Well, no, simply means that I will, either I am eternal, so God lives eternally, right? He's, but again, that's a characteristic that he has eternal life. But anyway, one, God is not a substance at all. God is not physical, one. And God is not spiritual, number two. Most people make a mistake on that. God is not a spiritual being, and he certainly is not a physical being. God does not have any gender, as some people think. He's neither a male nor a female. The concept of gender doesn't apply to him, you see. Like, are there such things as women angels? I'm sure we all hope that our wives are angels, right? However, there's no women angels, there's no male angels. The concept of gender doesn't apply to a malach, you know, in that sense, right? So clearly to God it certainly doesn't apply, right? So God is not a substance. He's not made of any kind of material, whether that material be physical or spiritual. So God is beyond the spiritual. Who he, in terms of what he's composed of, is unknown. That's number one. God does not exist in time, and God does not exist in space. God is spaceless. We cannot comprehend what does it mean not to exist in space. You see, what is space? Space is a necessity in order for physical beings to occupy themselves in. Space allows for something to be in it. That's what space is. Space isn't a thing. It allows something to be in it and to expand and so on. That's what space is, right? Time, what is time? Time is simply the duration of matter, where matter can endure. But what is time? Nobody knows what time is, really. We just know that the fact that we can endure means that we exist in time. So we can identify a past, present, and a future. But nobody knows what time is. Time is simply the endurance, the continuity of matter, or anything for that matter. That's all it is. But we don't know what time really is, you see. So God does not exist. He's not a substance, doesn't exist in space, doesn't exist in time. So how do we begin to understand God? Because what's that?
Can I ask you a question?
Want to ask me a question?
Yeah.
What's your question?
It said that
Don't hit him over the head. Go ahead.
Moshe said to God, how do I know you? So God says, you stay in the cliff, and I'll walk by, and you'll see
My back.
substance. I'll see Ephes.
Yeah, okay.
What is Ephes?
You mean, what do you, okay. You have to hold that
Okay.
for later on, okay? Because if I explain that now, I have a certain sequence. That's the best way to understand information. You have to, information has to be gathered in a certain order. You see? If you jump too far ahead, then you trip and fall, and no good. Very important concept of education. Order. Now, there is a place in the Torah that does describe who God is. And we say it twice a day. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Right? Hear Israel, the Lord our God. God is one. Right? That's it. One is a statement of His being. So it does say something about God, that He is one. So, how, so if He's one, it's very simple to understand. He's one and He's not two. You know what I'm saying? So, the question then is, why did it say, V'hashivoisa elevecho, and you know this day, right, that, and you shall settle your heart, that the Lord God, right, God is the Lord, heavens above, earth below, Einoid, there's nobody else, and so on. So what's this V'hashivoisa elevecho, that you will settle your heart, which means that you need to study Him to such an extent where your heart is not troubled by the fact that you don't know who He is. So the real question is, what's the big deal? It says He's one and that's all. How much study is there that you have to know that He's not two? I mean, it takes exactly 15 seconds to understand that. Clearly then, the pasuk, right, clearly indicates, the verse clearly indicates that the knowledge of God is incredibly profound and it's not easy to come to. So obviously, God has the fact that it says in the Torah, God is one, clearly has to be much greater than what it appears to be. So, let's begin to think about that. Let's take a look at the word one. Echad means one. Yes, God has the attribute of oneness. He is one. Okay, let's begin to think about that. If I asked you, we know there's one God, because the pasuk says there's one God, right? But why is God one God? He just happens to be one God, and there's no two? Is that what it is? In other words, is God lucky that He doesn't have to share His kingdom with anybody because there happens to be one God, one being called God? It's an interesting question. I mean, we know He's one, but what does it mean that He's one? He just happens to be one, and there's no two, but there could have been two. There isn't. So in that sense, He's lucky. Or does one mean that there cannot be two? It's a different kind of idea, you see. In other words, a being of the nature of God cannot exist as two beings. There can only be one being with that nature. What's the difference? One is called absolute unity and the other is called relative unity. Relative unity simply means there's one thing, but there could be another. So relative to something else, there could be another. However, there is only one. There are many things in this world which are only one, and there are not two. But that doesn't mean there could not have been two of them. There could have been. There are many artifacts, stamps or coins or whatever, that are one of a kind, but there could be two. That's called relative unity. Absolute unity means that there cannot be two. There cannot be two at all. Now, forget about why there can't be two, what prevents it. But that's the concept of absolute unity. So the first important idea is that God is one, and there cannot be two. Very important idea. Absolute unity. God's oneness is absolute. A being of the nature of God cannot be replicated or duplicated or two beings. Very important idea. So, the first level of understanding of who God is, that He's one, but He's absolutely one. Everybody got that? There's a second idea included in that concept, If I say this is one, what am I really saying? It's one, but not two. Right? What is the category that one fits in? When I say this is one, what category am I in? What am I really saying? Or rather, what parameter am I really dealing with? I'm dealing with quantity. What is one? One means that, what's the quantity of something? It's one. Is that not quantity that I'm dealing with? Yes? So if I say something is one, and it's not two, I'm really talking about how many? Or how many or how much? We're talking about quantity here. The truth is that God is not quantifiable. That's part of the concept that He's absolutely one. There is no such thing as quantity by God. You know, I could say something is one, but that's the concept of quantity. There could be two or three or four. So I can apply the word number to that being. But if God is absolute, there cannot be two, then in many ways He's not quantifiable. You cannot apply the idea called quantity, you see. It's not a matter if God happens to be one. There is nothing else but God, so God is not a quantifiable being. So we see that Echad is very profound, that He's absolute one and not relatively one. Okay? So we would think, okay, we've got our ideas, you know, fine, let's move on. But the truth is we can't move on, because the word Echad also indicates something else. What we're really doing is studying oneness in depth. That's what we're doing. And we realize that there are many different shades, aspects of oneness. So we've discovered one, which is He's absolutely one. But God also is one in this sense. The human body is composed of 100 trillion cells. That's a lot of cells. I mean, it really is a huge number. You know, if you want to get a handle on what a trillion is, you got to get a handle on this, right? Like, what's 1 trillion? We don't even know what a billion is. What is a trillion? And 100 trillion cells? Let me give you a handle. How's this? Let me graphically illustrate what one trillion is. If I had $1 bill and I stacked them up, if I had $100 bills and I stacked them up to be $1 million, how high would that stack be? $100 bills stacked up to be 1 million. How high is the stack or the pile? And the answer is 40 inches. That's all it is. It's 40 inches. It's a wonder we're not millionaires. I mean, we cannot gather, Rabbi Go, $100 to a 40-inch stack. It's almost attainable, isn't it? Anyway, it's 40 inches high. A stack of $100 bills that equals $1 million. It's not bad. No big deal. Now, if I asked you, well, if that stack of $100 bills went up to $1 trillion, we'll skip the billion. $1 trillion, how high would that stack be? The answer is 674 miles. It says, well, miles. That's the way, right? 74 miles. So imagine you go from 40 inches to 674 miles. That you begin to grasp this, and it's worth about 1 trillion. You begin to grasp what this number is. The U.S. government owes $15 trillion. Now let's really make some sense of this. So 15 trillion times 674 miles, right, is almost from the United States to India. In $100 bills. That's the United States debt, which is suicide. When you think about what the U.S. government is doing, they are committing financial suicide. Because they cannot pay that back, really. They're going to have to cut like crazy. And they're going to wind up being like Greece, where everybody's going to rebel. Because everybody wants entitlements. Anyway, you figure, okay, now the human body has 100 trillion cells. The number is awesome. But then the question is, that means when you look at a person, you're really looking at 100 trillion cells, all wrapped up in some being that's 6 feet tall, 5 feet 5, which is absolutely beyond belief. You see. What does that tell you? That the human body is a mechanism that is beyond comprehension in its complexity. The brain alone has 100 billion neurons. You know, it's beyond belief, and it's all weighs about 3.5, 4 pounds, and it's all contained with this little thing called the skull. 100 billion cells that is responsible. Now remember, the brain is responsible for controlling the rest of the 100 trillion cells. That is the equivalent of 18,000 planets. Each planet having 4 billion people. And there's one administrator for all of it. That's what the human brain does. You see. So that's called complexity. That's really the concept of the complexity of the world. Whether it be a human, be a plant, a bug, an ant. I mean, the ants that are less than almost like a nanometer. But it's a full entity. Like, you know, it's got a heart that's beating. How big that heart's got to be? 2 cells wide. Yet there are little creatures walking around that are more complex than the greatest computer ever made. That is the greatest argument for the existence of a supreme being. Because there's no chance could never have completed any of this stuff. But the key idea is complexity. So if we ask ourselves, well, how complex is God? And the answer is, God is not complex at all. God is a single entity that has a single thing, and that's God. In other words, His being is not composed of more than one thing. Truly. Which means that God is indivisible, because you can't cut it. If you go to an atom, and an atom is unbelievably small, I think if the nucleus of an atom was in New York, then the first electron would appear somewhere in Minnesota. That's how much space is in an atom. But it can be split. Anything that has substance can be cut. You see. God is indivisible. He can't be cut. Why? Because there's only one thing, and that one thing has no quantity. So if you have one thing and it has no quantity, it cannot be divided. It's indivisible. Now we cannot comprehend this. What does that mean, it's indivisible? It is indivisible. So God is one internally. Pasha, simple. So therefore, one means externally he's the only one, and he's indivisible. He's only one thing, which means internally one. You can't cut him. Even if we know that even if something is one, you can always keep cutting, right? As long as it has some type of length, you can cut. You know, nobody knows where the end is. That it's so small that you can't even cut that. But theoretically, if you had a knife smaller than the thing, you could cut it. So it's a paradox. It's like nobody can understand, well, how small does something have to be that it doesn't allow itself to be cut? And the answer is, we don't know. Because all you need is a knife that's smaller than the object that you're cutting, and you can cut the object, you see. But it probably exists somewhere in 10 to the minus 43. Somewhere in 10 to the minus 43, there is it's almost there's no space, almost. That's 10, that's 1 followed by 43 zeros. Or 10 followed by 43 zeros, you see. Anyway, so God is indivisible, so that's a second meaning, the fact that He's one. Echad, one, He's eternally one, you see. But again, we can hear this, but we cannot comprehend this at all. Very important idea. But that also tells us many things. If God is internally one, He's pashut, He's simple. You see. And there are ideas that can come out of this. now that we understand that there are two ideas to God. You see. But the question that we need to ask ourselves is, what type of a being could there be? Well, actually, let me ask you this. Now, there must be some philosophers in this class, yes? That are going to say, wait a minute, I can prove to you that there has to be at least two things in God. What are the two things? Let's take this cup. This cup is a thing. As such, it has characteristics, right? It has shape, it has color, it has a lot of stuff in it, right? That's called its essence of what it is. The essence of something is nothing more than those characteristics that make it be what it is. If you would remove one of the aspects or characteristics, it would cease to be that. So when you talk about the essential characteristics of a thing, you really talk about what are those characteristics that make the thing what it is. And if you removed one of them, it would cease to be that, because you would tamper with its essence. So we understand that everything has an essence, but everything also has something else. It has the quality of existence. What is existence? Existence means it has the ability to be. Now we know what being is because we know what non-being is. Non-being is you're not here. Being means you're present. So we know what being is, yes? So wait a minute. This cup then consists of two things, minimally. It consists of the characteristics that makes it a cup, but what it also consists of is existence itself. Now, can you separate the two? No. In fact, how do we know that existence is a phenomenon? Because we see things that exist. How do I know I exist? Right? Because as what's his name, Descartes said, I am because I think, or I think therefore I am. In other words, it is through the faculty of thinking that I know I exist, because how could I think if I didn't exist? You see. So we have two things in this cup. Its existence and its essence. So you're going to tell me, wait a minute, God also is a thing, whatever he is, but God has to have an existence. He is, right? And he has an essence, whatever he's made up of. So there you are. He's not echad, he's not simple, he's complex. He's made up of at least two things. You see? So you're going to tell me that and try to refute me. And my answer to you will be no. That the existence of God is not external to him. God doesn't have existence, really. Or if I asked you, I always ask this question, how many people believe that God has existence? You believe he has existence. Well, you belong in this place. How many people believe that God has existence?
No, I mean in the sense that we exist.
He exists.
So therefore, aren't we a part of...
No, it's a simple question. Does God have existence? What would you answer? Who says he does? Who says God has existence? What are you, a bunch of Apikosim? Yeah. What is this? What Yeshiva is this anyway? Who said this? You know, I've lectured in many Yeshivas, but I never lectured in Yeshiva that is fully Apikosim.
100%. There's no.
That's why we have a big teacher out of
Not a single person.
And not only that, even the Rosh Yeshivas didn't answer yes. So I imagine they're also Apikosim. This is incredible.
Listen, this will make it easy to raise $100 million. Everybody will give to that.
I know, there's something wrong with this place. I tell you. I asked a simple question. Does God have existence? And nobody answered. Nobody raised his hand, so I assume you're all Yapikosim here. Anyway, by the way, I agree. God does not have existence. Lest you all look at me in shock. God doesn't have it. He is it. That's the difference. God doesn't have it. We have existence. Therefore, it can be taken away from us. God doesn't have it. He is existence, per se. See, the problem is we've never met existence. We've never met him and shook his hand. What is it? What is existence without an object? We don't know. We've never met that quality, you see. But really, that's why God is simple, is one, because he doesn't have it, he is it. So it's amazing to think about that God is pure existence without an essence. In fact, the essence of God is existence. Per se, that's what he is. Got it? Which is astounding. And therefore, why is it nobody knows who God is? Nobody, including the Malachim. Nobody has any inkling of who he is. In fact, we say that. In Kedusha. Where is this place that we may praise him? Nobody knows. So we say, Baruch Shem Kvod Mekomai, blessed be God from wherever he's at. We have no idea who he is. There's no entity that knows who God is. Why? Because everybody has existence and they are not existent. But that has tremendous amount of repercussions. Because if we have existence, what we really have is God. The existence of who we are is God. So we emanate. No. They have no idea who God is or where he's at. Why? Well, that's because a throne is independent of God. But that's not God. A throne is not the same as the king sitting on top of it. Right? This is a problem. So therefore, clearly if God is existence, right, then we all emanate from existence, because who gives us our existence? It's God. Right? So therefore, God is the source of all being. So if I ask you, where is God? You wouldn't look up there, up, down, sideways. You'd look in yourself and say, I emanate from him. You see, God is closer to you than even your wife, or even yourself. He is, or rather you emanate from him. You are not God, don't make that mistake. But the existence that you have is him. That's how close he is, you see. And therefore God, again, Echad is one. One means no complexity. That means God is an absolute, indivisible, non-complex being that is composed of one thing, as far as we know, and that is existence in and of itself. So the essence of God is being itself. That answers many questions. Many questions. One, the essential word or noun that refers to God is Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. Yes? That's the tetragrammaton. Yes? Why? Because that word comes from the verb to be. Lihiyos. You see? So Yud-Kei Vav-Kei comes from the verb to be, because God essentially is being. That's what he is. So it makes sense why the essential name of God is Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. Not only that, when Moshe Rabbeinu says to him, what's your name? Obviously Moshe Rabbeinu was trying to get a handle on, well, who are you? Because we hope that the name reflects who you are. So what's God's answer? And I'm ignoring the fact that it's in the future tense. I am that I am, I will be what I will be, ignoring the tense, but you want to know who I am? I am. That's it. In other words, if you look at this in the English language, how do I say I walk? So in Hebrew you say ani holech. In English you say I am walking. What does the word am mean? Anybody know what am means? The word am really simply means being. English needs to express the concept of existence. In other words, it's like saying I exist and walk. You see, Hebrew doesn't need to express the word to be. So Hebrew says ani holech. It's assumed that if a person walks, it's assumed he probably exists. But English needs to express the word am, you see, or I will, even though it's future, you know, did. All these things are verbs to be in a certain sense, but when God says I am, that I am, God is saying, I am the am. All day long I am. I'm amming all day long. If you want to use that as a verb. I'm amming. Means I'm being. In other words, I am the am of the sentence I am.
How do you know it's not? I am that. I am.
Well, that is what?
That.
Demonstrative. What is that? Demonstrative pronoun. What is that? That refers to a specific noun. But God is not a noun. Right? I mean, God is a noun, but God is existence. So you can't say, I am that. I am. No, God is really very accurate. I am the am. I am. It's like I am the am. I'm the being. You see. But what this does is it allows us to understand many things. One, why is God omnipotent? Omnipotent means He can do anything. He's all powerful. How? Because if you are existence itself, you can do anything you want. You're not restricted because you're existence. So you can make existence do it, right? Existence can bring anything into existence. Can it not? What does that mean? He's omnipotent. He's all powerful. You see, it makes a lot of sense. The only being that's all powerful is a being that's existence itself. So therefore he can make be whatever he wants. No restrictions. How come God knows everything? He's omniscient. How does he know everything? Because he's existence. And he knows everything because everything emanates from him, so he knows everything that emanates from him. You see? So he knows everything. In fact, if God doesn't know something, it's because it doesn't exist. So who cares if he doesn't know it? There's nothing to know. You see? How does God know that I'm giving a shiur? And that everybody here is paying attention. We hope. How does God know this? Is it because he's out there looking at us? No. No. He knows it because we emanate from God. God knows that I'm giving a shiur because God knows himself. And therefore he knows us. You see?
Are we an extension?
Well, in a certain sense, we are an emanation of his. But not really an extension. You have to hold on to that. It's a valid question. But right now, we clearly see that in a certain sense, let's keep it at this level, we do extend from him in that he is our existence and he makes us be. So God knows everything is because he has self-knowledge. God doesn't see us. We emanate from him. He knows himself, so he knows everything else. That's why he's omniscient. Is God omnipresent? God is all over. Why? Because there can be no such thing as a place if God doesn't make it be. Because even space needs God to make it. So therefore God is all over. Moli kolor tzkavoidai. His glory fills all existence. Why? Because if he wasn't there, that place wouldn't exist. You see? So these things are very interesting. They are explained from the fact that God is being per se. Not only that, but God is one. Why is one? Because you can have many things that have existence. But existence is only one thing. There's no duplicate of existence. Existence is, and that's it. There are no existences. There are things that have existence, but that which is existence is one thing. That's why God is absolutely one. You see, that now you begin to understand. A being that is existence itself cannot have two things. There is no two things. It's existence. And therefore God is one and absolutely one. And also you understand a very important feature that the Rambam brings out. He's Muchor HaMetzius. God must be. We may or may not be. We can actually evaporate and annihilate out of existence. God cannot not exist. Why? Because if you have existence, it can be taken from you. But if you are existence, where are you going to go? Where are you going to go? You can't take existence out of being that is existence. It's not something which is added to his essence. It is his essence. So if you take it out, what you're really doing is schlepping God. So where's he going to go? Existence cannot annihilate itself. You see what I'm saying? So that's why one of the fundamental features of who God is, which the Rambam writes, And Ramchal writes in Darech Hashem, is he's muchlach hametzius. He is a necessary being. He must be. Which again, so the concept of poshet, simple, answers many, many different ideas. Many ideas. It's a beautiful explanation. Actually, it's a beautiful principle that explains many attributes of God. Does everybody get that? Clearly we're dealing with a being that is existence itself. I mean, we don't know anything about that being. And that's the reason why nobody knows who God is. Because nobody knows what their existence is. They have it, but they have no idea of what they are, you see. Even an angel has existence, you see. So it doesn't know who it is. It emanates from God, has no idea who God is. Have I got that? Interesting idea. But it's also a very profound idea. You know, most people have no inkling of even this idea. Even the first idea, they don't have an inkling that God is absolutely one, right? That He cannot be two. But to say the nature of God is existence itself, most people have no idea. And by the way, the Ramchal alludes to this, which is very interesting. Because the Ramchal says that He's Sholem. The only thing we know about God is that He's perfect. You know, in the first pair. He says that God is perfect. Perfect? What does perfection mean? That God has no deficiencies, He has no limitations, and He has no dependencies. What does that mean? God is not deficient in anything. He doesn't lack anything to be. He's got it all. God has no dependencies. He's not dependent in another being to be. You see, that concept of dependencies. We are dependent on God. This table has shape. Does shape exist? Yes or no? It has shape. But notice, if I annihilated the table, what would happen to the shape? It would disappear. If I annihilate, it would disappear. So shape is a being that needs to have another being to exist in. That's called an accidental being. A being that cannot exist in and of itself, but needs to adhere into another being, is called an accidental being. That's what it's called. Mikra. That's okay? So therefore shape is an accidental being. So is size. So is color. Color needs something to be in. If the thing didn't exist, there would be no color. You see? So therefore, we are accidental beings. We need God to exist in. If He disappeared, we all would instantly evaporate. Whereas if we disappeared, He'd go on. We also understand why God exists, why God is eternal. It's the same idea why He must be. A being that must be is eternal. There's no end. He can't stop being, because, you see what I'm saying? A being that is existence itself, right, is eternal. Because it's muchlach hametzius. He must be, so that type of being must be. In fact, that type of being was always and always will be. Right? Because it didn't come in like people are always bothered by, where'd God come from? Right? Where did He come from, how do you arrive, We know we came from, we're born and so on and so forth, But always the question is, what's the first cause? It's our mother, and then she had a mother, and she had a mother. Going back to Adam, well, where did Adam come from? You see, we always need to understand the concept of a beginning, or a first cause. So people are always bothered, well, who caused God? And the answer is, a being that is existence itself has no cause. Why? Because it must be. So there was never a time that it wasn't. But it's hard to figure that out, Wait a minute, there wasn't. So, what made Him? No, nothing made Him, because He must be. And if He must be, then He always was. And if He always was, He always will be. You see, we get caught because we have limits of language and so on. That's why God has no first cause. because he must be and he always was, and therefore he always will be. There are many things that are explained by the concept that God is existence itself. Everybody got that? Any questions?
Yeah, how do you prove that all of it is just one giant thought?
How do I prove it's one giant thought? What do you mean?
Like any of this is real.
What's real?
You, me, this room.
Well, God gave us existence, so we are real. How do I prove it? Well, I'm looking at the screen here, and I see my image.
Yeah, how do you know?
So that means I exist.
Like, how do you know one of us or all of us aren't in a coma?
So what you're asking is a different question. Is reality subjective or objective? You know, which is an interesting question. Our reality is subjective, means I look at you, but I don't know if you're there. I have no idea who you are. I perceive a certain type of person. But maybe he looks at you and he sees somebody else. So we don't know that we're looking at the same thing, but it's two different perceptions.
If this is white to me and it's white to you.
To you, but really, it could be really, to me, it's really red, but we call it white because you call it white. So I'll never know that really we're looking at two different things because there's a problem. So reality to us is subjective. In fact, if I asked you, is God part of reality, what would you answer? Is God part of reality? What? No, he is not reality at all. Reality is part of God. That's the way it works. Existence determines what is, and what is reality. So God is not part of reality. He's not part of something. He's not dependent on reality. Reality is part of him. He calls the shots. He determines the logic, the laws, etc. of reality. Therefore, he could have made reality completely different. You see? Which is interesting. God could have made reality. There are three fundamental laws of reality. They're called the transcendental laws of being. Okay? I'll give you one law. Between existence and non-existence, there's no middle. How's that sound? Middle. In other words, either, as they say in English, either you is or you ain't. There is no middle. Existence is dichotomous. It either is or it's not. There's no middle. Well, who made the rule? Why is there no middle? That's what God decided. So his reality is made existence, and there can only be is or is not. There cannot be a middle. Or another transcendental law of being is, okay, something either exists or it doesn't exist. It cannot exist and non-exist at the same time. Did you ever see anything that exists and non-exists at the same time? No. No such thing. And by the way, that concept, in other words, reality to us, right, is that something is, this table is or it's not, right? It cannot be and not be at the same instant in time. You see? And by the way, that law of reality which God decided, see, God can make a reality where this table is and is not at the same time. And we don't know what that means because we've never experienced something like that. But if he wanted, in fact, he did make that.
But could it be happening that this table doesn't exist in a different plane right now?
No, I'm talking about simultaneously in the same plane.
In the same plane?
Yeah, because, no, if you had a different plane, then it could. But because its conditions would vary. But can this table exist and not exist at the same place, time, instant time, situation? No. It either is or it's not. Who made that rule? God. Did God violate that rule? Of course he violated it. The Oren. The Oren is a violation of that rule. You see. Because if you measure it from one side of if you measure the length of Kodesh HaKadoshim, it would measure, let's say, 10 amas. Right? The ark, that's okay. The ark of the covenant and so on. So it was housed in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, in the Holy of Holies. Well, the interesting thing about it is if you measured one side of the Holy of Holies to the other side, so let's assume it was 10 amas. Let's say 10 feet. Fine. Now, the ark was in the middle. If you measure the ark itself, let's say it's 2.5 feet. Right? Then what you do is you measure from one end of the arc to the end, one end, and the other end of the arc to the other end, so it should be 10 minus 2.5, which is 7.5, right? Because the arc takes up space. But when you measured it, lo and behold, from one side of the arc to the end was 5 feet, and from the other side was 5 feet, yet it measured 2.5 feet. That's a violation of what? It either is or it's not. So the arc is, because you measured it was 2.5 feet, but yet it wasn't, because from either end it was only 5 feet, which is the total length of the entire thing. So the arc violated reality. The arc was a physical object that violated the law of the transcendental law of being. You see what I'm saying? Unbelievable. But God can do that, because He's in charge of reality, not the vice versa. So He determines the rules. And by the way, there's a very important logical thing that comes out of it. Contradiction. What is a contradiction? A contradicts B, which means it's opposite, right? But a contradiction cannot exist, because if contradictions could exist, right, at the same time, then that would violate the law, because something could be and not be at the same time. Therefore, contradiction can exist in reality. But God made the rule where it cannot exist in reality, so therefore that's how we reason, contradiction. That's one of our logical philosophies, how we come to conclusions. Well, if something a contradiction, clearly it has to have a resolution. It can't be a contradiction. But in God's sphere, contradictions can exist simultaneously. In fact, the whole concept of the arc measurement is a contradiction in space, yet it exists at the same time. I'm trying to show you that God determines reality, not reality determines God. And therefore, those laws which are part of reality are really God-made laws, and God can violate them. Very interesting concept, how ultimately supreme God is. Yeah? What'd you say? Yes. Free will is a problem. You're getting ahead of yourself. Free will is a real problem. But anyway, how does it work? Anyway, yeah. In Olam Haba, yes?
When the Gemara talks about Yeshivas, is that talking about knowing Hashem's possessions?
What is the experience in Olam Haba? It takes too long. What happens in Olam Haba? Interesting question. Everybody would love to know. What happens there? I will tell you what I think happens there. And you see it from Chazal, from their Lashon. What is Olam Haba really all about? We know it's beyond belief. What is beyond belief? But I have a problem, because my time is up. Don't look at me. Look at Rabbi Gold.
Oh, don't tell me I haven't been pushing it.
So what do you guys want? I need permission from the powers that be.
Order out. We started late, Jason, for 10:45. No more.
Olam Haba means the future world. It means what happens in the future, the world to come. Olam Haba, the future world. It's supposed to be an incredible place. Our whole existence is tied to that, and we give up everything because we want Olam Haba. What happens there? Okay, so everybody's got different versions. The Muslims have their version. We all know what they're waiting for, right? Well, I hope they haven't run out of them. I just hope they haven't run out of them. The problem is once a woman isn't that, you can't make her anymore that because she isn't that. Well, that's a hakira. What exactly is? I don't get into that. Anyway, what is a psula? If somebody doesn't have this, or anyway, I don't get the hakira. But anyway, what is Olam Haba really about? Okay, in the end, really, I will tell you my opinion. I will tell you what I think Olam Haba is. However, you can argue with me. and so on. And here's the classic mistake. And by the way, I have not finished talking about God. It's going to have to go into next week. However, Olam Haba is this. Everything in the universe, any experience in the universe varies. It has degrees, right? Pleasure has degrees of pleasure. Everything has either quantity or quality. If it has quantity, then it has amount or number. Yes? It's called variation, right? If it's quality, then it has degrees. Red. There's redness in degrees. Some things are more red than others, right? But that's a concept of degree as opposed to, you probably can measure its quantity too by the amount of frequency or whatever. Sound waves has frequency, so you can actually count the waves per second and so on. But everything has either quantity or quality in its being. Fine. Everything. Any experience that we have can be measured, either in quantity or quality in degrees. There's only one thing that you cannot measure. It has no variations at all. You know what that is? Existence itself.
What?
Existence itself. You either exist or you don't exist. There are no degrees of existence. Yeah, there are degrees of attributes, right? Your shirt can be more gray, less gray, you know, or your, well, more bald or less bald or whatever. Okay, right? Anyway, right? But existence doesn't have variations. It's dichotomous. It is or it's not. There are no variations. Is it possible that you can exist more? Think about that. Is it possible that we have a certain amount of existence or degree? You know, let's assume it's 1. But we don't understand what that means. Existence either is or it's not. But imagine if existence itself has degrees. Imagine if you went from a 1 to a 10. That means you would exist more. And we don't know what that means. What do you mean exist more? I am or I'm not. But imagine if there was such a thing as more existence. Not more attributes, but more existence. Wouldn't that be incredible? We need a mashal. We need an analogy here. Right? Imagine you get up in the morning and all of a sudden you wake up and you're in the zone. Peak is, right? You jump out of bed because all systems are incredible. The human body is at its peak performance, right? And you jump out of bed and you scream, wow, another day!
That's me.
That's you. Okay. That is an analogy. That's he's 90. He's 90.
We have to get the lady to get to that point.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. Actually, I really hope to know what you mean. And you need to say to me, Amen.
Amen.
That's it. Okay.
But I'm not kidding. That's how I wake up. Let's go.
But what does that mean? The only analog I can give you is the concept of well-being. There are different degrees of well-being. In fact, the word is well-being or being well. You know, and it doesn't mean, feeling well, being well. It's an expression of being. It's a rare moment. Most of the time we don't have that. Most of the time when the alarm clock rings, right, we take the cover and put it over our head and say, oh, you developed another day, right? That's what we say, right? But there are times when you feel fabulous. That's an analogy. To exist more, something happens where it's just beyond the pleasure of greater existence. Not greater well-being or greater feeling or whatever. But just the being itself is indescribable. That is in terms of what I understand, is what happens in Olam Haba. Now, we can hear it, but we cannot experience it, obviously. But is there a remez in Chazal? Do the rabbis hint at this? And the answer is yes. No, forget Shabbos. Shabbos is a long way off from Olam Haba. Shabbos is not Olam Haba, but it's a main Olam Haba. No, forget Shabbos. Where do we see that? Because it says in Chazal, when they talk about Olam Habo, it says everything that the prophets prophesied is concerning the Gan Eden or Yemos HaMashiach. More accurate, right? Everything they said was about the Messianic era, which is incredible. Imagine an era, right, that there is no hunger, no thirst, there's no sickness, there's no death. It's peak, actually it's the body and peak performance. It's really what it is, you know. That's the Mashiach, Messianic era, right? So it says that everything that the prophets ever talked about was only in reference to the Messianic era. But what will be, but Mashat Sofan Tzadikim, but what is stored up for the righteous, right? The Asad Lova in the future world, which is beyond the Messianic era, Ayin Lo Yirasa, the eye has never beheld what God has in store in the end, which is the future world. Now, it should have said, you know, everything the prophets did was concerning the Messianic era, but the brain, the mind cannot comprehend what is in store for the tzaddikim. But it doesn't say that. It doesn't say the moach lo yochel lochoven, right? What's going to be in the future. No, it says ayin lo yirasa. The eye is never seen. What do you mean the eye is seen? What's the difference in expression if you say the brain cannot comprehend or the eye has never seen? What's the difference? The difference is this. You want to say something?
Well, I was thinking just in that description, it sounds like you can create it what you think it is, but you haven't seen it yet.
Be more exact. It's not exact, you know. There's no deficiency in understanding. The deficiency is I've never seen the experience. That's the difference. What Chazal are telling you is that, listen, we can understand Olam Haba. You see, what is that? Because I can understand what existence with degrees are. I can hear it, but I've never seen it. I've never seen it, so I cannot understand what the experience is like. Right? It's like we cannot see angels. We have no idea of what the spiritual universe is all about. But I can hear it. I don't have a problem hearing it or understanding it. I know that there are beings that consist of a different matter. They're subject to different laws. You know, whatever. They're superior to us and so on. But I've never seen that. Don't ask me what it is in terms of an experience or description. I don't know. That's what Chazal are being merames. They picked the right language. They didn't say the mind cannot comprehend. No. The mind can, like oneness, right? I tell you, God is internally one. There's no parts, and He's indivisible. I mean, I can hear it. I have no idea what it is. I've never seen a being like that. You see? But I can hear it. The Rambam says that. These ideas that we can hear these things, you know, but we've never seen it, right? That's what the Rambam says. We can hear it, but we have no understanding of it experientially. Same idea. Chazal Merames, that we can hear it. You see, we can understand it and hear it, but we have never seen it. We have no prior experience with such a being that actually has a variation, a degree of existence itself. All I can tell you, you got that Chazal? I am medayek, which means I am learning from the language of the rabbis what the future world is, in essence. Therefore, if there is a variation of degree of existence itself that we can feel, this is what emerges. One, that the pleasure is infinite. The pleasure of being more is a lot better than being less. And I gave you the example of well-being. In fact, existence, how many degrees of existence are there? But it has degrees. More.
Multiple.
Not multiple, degrees.
That they're all enfolded into a Shem.
Wait.
They're part of a Shem.
Yes, but let me get to the conclusion. How many degrees are there in existence itself? And the answer is infinite. That's why the future world is infinite. That's number one. We don't understand that. What do you mean infinite degrees? We don't understand what degrees in existence are. So let's say there are 10 of them. And then when you hit 10, it's over. No. There are infinite amount of degrees of being. So therefore the future world is infinite. It goes on forever. That's number one. Number two, who is existence that we are experiencing? God. Isn't because He is the existence of us. So what I'm really saying is that we actually experience God insofar as we can experience Him, right? So it's a direct experience of God Himself, because that's what existence is, you see. So that's really ultimately what happens. We experience God as existence per se, infinite degrees. But who are we experiencing? Well, who is existence? God. So we experience God. That's really what we experience. And therefore, how? Because that's called bevekus, the attachment. Uboy sidbak. And you will attach to Him, right? Because the experience of the future world is a divine experience. It's experiencing God. But the experiencing of God is infinite. Now, does that mean we will know who He is? No. Because for that I have to explain next week why that doesn't mean we will know who He is because we experience existence in degrees. No. Because for that you have to go next week and so on. But to the extent that He is existence to us, we will experience God in His infinite degrees of existence.
In that place right now? Who we are right now?
Well, Yeshiva Rabbi Akiva is that place. I need a
raise. Isn't that true though? Wherever we are in existence, this is existence also.
But in the lowest degree. In the lowest degree.
We're the lowest degree now, not the lowest.
No, we're the lowest. We just are. But we start up from here. That's why it says, Tzaddikim, they have no menucha in Olam Haba. Tzaddikim have no rest in the future world. What do you mean no rest? You mean you got to do something there too? Yeah. But you have no rest, not in working, but in experiencing reward. It's an infinite climb, degree, higher, higher. So, which is amazing. People, it's not that, okay, now I have Olam Haba and it's phenomenal. No. I have, what I experience in Olam Haba in any given day is infinitely less than what I will experience on the next day, which is infinitely less what I will experience in the next day. So that's what it means, that tzaddikim have no rest. There's no such thing as static in the future world. There's just like here, there's a constant getting closer and closer to God. In the future world, there will be a constant change in my status as in terms of my experiencing of God. It will go on for eternity. We have no idea what that is. Eternal, that means if 100 billion years have passed, that's not even a drop in the bucket for eternity, because that goes on forever. Even 100 billion years is zero compared to eternity, because it never ends. So the reward that God has in store for us, it's beyond belief. I don't know you was so. We have no idea what it is to vary in degrees, existence, and that this can go on forever. Such is that which waits. What?
No experience or knowing
But that is not the experiencing.
that's not only that's beyond.
That's beyond, yes. Yes. As the Ramchal says, to know God is to be God. That's it. The only one who knows who God is Himself. Nothing, and we'll see why next week. It is not possible to know who God is. What I'm telling you is a certain idea which answers many, many different problems. Right now we're at the level of understanding that God is existence per se. However, there's much deeper levels of understanding which I will talk about next week. Much deeper than this. So see you next week.
One thing before you stop, if you can. Moshe seeing Hashem's back.
You asked that before.
Yeah, I know.
I'll answer that question next week, because you need to have information. You'll be around next week. You'll be around a long time after that.
The way you get up in the morning.
Here, okay.
Thanks.
Now, I can only put that in my head
Head.
and
Assimilate it. Great.
I will shut that off.
How do we close this?